Greetings once again. It's a pleasure to be back and it's a pleasure to be having this conversation with you. So, in the last video, I talked about the fact that this coming week I was to talk about lessons and reflections from the PSK conference that we had in May. And when I'm looking at these, actually, this is going to be the discussion, and probably I'll have another sequel to the same. But at the starting point is what are the main reflections? What were the emerging themes? What are the trends? What are the discussion points? And how do we make the best of these conversations? And I think as a learning opportunity, being it a scientific conference, we are learning from a scientific perspective, but at the same time, as we are working as professionals, our domain does not remain within the scientific realm. We learn the science to be able to solve societal and social problems in our dynamics, and that is why we are professionals in our line of work. And therefore, the professionalism in our work is to serve the society and the communities that we serve in our practice. And that is a very critical bit to acknowledge. And if you're here with me and you've already engaged and you've been following some of this content, my request is to you subscribe to the channel. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's share the learning with others to ensure that we keep driving the profession and healthcare service delivery generally to the population that we work with and engage with, to ensure that we're able to grow ourselves. And with that said, I'll get into the basics and the concept that we're going to discuss for this particular day as reflections on what I did. Lucky thing, today I've started reading one of my books. Actually, the current read is Beyond Order by Jordan B. Peterson, 12 More Rules for Life. And the other one of his other books is on chaos and beyond chaos. And I think these are some of the things that the 12 rules for life was the first one. And this second one is Beyond Order. And this book, as I'm reading it, the interesting bit is I read chapter 1, that is the first rule I was talking about, and this puts context to the conversation that we had during the conference and some of the emerging trends that have dominated our conversations as professionals. And what does that entail? Do not carelessly denigrate the social institutions or creative achievement. And the basic as to why, the premise as to why I'm going to refer to these and have a conversation on it is because, one, we have social institutions and we are social beings. Therefore, we are formulated and operate and engage within societal norms and societal standards. There is what is acknowledged and acclaimed and believed to be the truth, and there are those that are new creative ventures that we are bringing in to make a change on what has worked, but with a room for improvement. And as a scientist and as scientists, we believe in continuous improvement. So be that as the premise of our conversation and our engagement, we need to ask ourselves, how do we improve to get better? But as we get better, we are not making the social institutions, the existing structures, seem so obsolete, and the people who have worked with them, who have built them, lose their value. Why do we talk about this? We are young pharmacists and we have senior pharmacists, and the dynamics of the job market are super unforgiving, especially to the young pharmacists and the young professionals. Young professionals in general, because it's not only unemployment is not only limited to the pharmacies, but also to other cadres and other professions across the world. And with that said, then the question you need to ask yourself is, why has it gotten to this level? Where are the problems and what are some of the challenges? This became a heated discussion in terms of how can senior pharmacists support young pharmacists, and how can young pharmacists drive change in a sustainable way that we do not append the existing, but rather improve on the existing to make it better. Where would there need for adjustments? How do we make those adjustments be enabling for both of us as across the profession? And that is a critical bit for us as we need to understand. So the existing systems, not so effective, not efficient, not sustainable, in the sense that they've failed us. There's more in need for healthcare services that need to be delivered, but they're not being delivered. There's a thought of everybody willing and asking themselves, how do we do this? And that is also some of the conversation that I discussed in the video that I did before the conference itself, on the discussion around B Farm and Farm D and all that. These conversations are still happening. But the reason as to why they are coming in is because somebody sees there's need to do something. There's need for a solution, and the solution should be enabling us to move from where we are, where the challenge, the gaps are there in the market in terms of whether we're delivering value in the practice settings, whether we are not delivering value, what needs to be done. That is part one. Then on the other end is asking ourselves, how do we ensure we create those opportunities? Are we going to create opportunities with the same thinking that got us here? Definitely not. And for me, basing on that, the first thing that we have to acknowledge is, from the conference, the theme itself was on positioning pharmacists in a rapidly evolving market, in a dynamic healthcare environment. So in a dynamic healthcare environment, as you look at it, what are the dynamics that are happening? And this is a conversation that we had as well in the conference, and I think most of us as pharmacists, we have to be awake to the realization that pharmacy practice is not going to be as it is, as it was, and therefore we need to start reimagining the future, envisioning what that future would look like. When you look at it from the basic level of employment opportunities for professionals, what's happening? Initially, when we were training in campus, we were being told community pharmacy, industrial pharmacy, and hospital pharmacy. And most of them, the most critical one were hospital and the community pharmacy, because that is where most of the opportunity were existing. With the current conversation after COVID-19, there's a growing focus on pharmaceutical sector and the pharmaceutical industry specifically. What does that look like? The pharmaceutical industry is going to explode substantially. More people need access to care, and access to care is synonymous to medicines, healthcare products, and technologies. Therefore, investors and the pharma companies and medicine companies and technologies are venturing into our market. When they're venturing into our markets, we understand their regulations. And for these regulations to be in place, it means every single company that intends to venture into our market must register their product. Regulatory affairs professionals are needed. Once they brought their product into the market, there is need for the life cycle maintenance. That will be still regulatory affairs in part, but also the quality assurance component to ensure that any quality incident that might be experienced across the chain, somebody is responsible for that. That is going to be a quality assurance role. The other bit would be the pharmacovigilance. A patient is using this medicine, they experience an adverse event. How is it reported? How does the company itself ensure that these measures are put in place? The pharmacovigilance aspect is invoked. That is another responsibility that somebody needs to be able to address. And on the backdrop of that, when COVID came, there were conversations on why is it that we don't have clinical trials happening in Africa. There's a limited level of clinical trials that are happening in Africa. And therefore, there is this push to have more clinical trials that are more diverse and more representative of the populations that should be using these medicines. What does that pose to us? It is giving room for us to build our local clinical trial infrastructure, which means there's going to be more clinical trials, principal investigators, study pharmacists. Those are opportunities that pharmacists and actually any healthcare professional, from doctors and pharmacists and dentists, are able to venture into. When I talk to pharmacists, you can be a principal investigator, you can be a sub-investigator, you can be a study pharmacist. Those are things that you can venture into. Those are going to be opportunities, and there are more clinical trials getting into our landscape and into the space where we are working. So that is in terms of the clinical trial space. I've talked about the pharma industry that are coming in and setting up their operations. As they're setting up operations, there's more stringent controls on pharmaceutical marketing, because we've known that there's irrational use and an inadvertent access to some of the pharmaceuticals, which is contributing to some of the critical challenges that we're having from a global health perspective, which are antimicrobial resistance, which is on the rise. We have opioid addiction and opioid overuse in some of the cases associated with irrational marketing, and therefore we need to have greater controls in the marketing of some of these controlled products. What does that entail? That entails having a pharmacist as a medical representative, but within the provisions on what additional value are they offering in the marketing of this product to the physician, to the qualified professionals, and how are they handling in that particular case. Each of those companies that are coming in will need warehouses, need distribution plants and all that. Who does that job? Should be a pharmacist. So these are opportunities that are opening up. In that case, then you need to tell yourself the curriculum needs to change to be able to meet these gaps, either in additional programs or by reviving the curriculum and actually having more collaborative engagements with the industry. That is why the discussions on curriculum review are very critical and very essential, and we need to look at it from what do we envision for the industry, what are the current needs, how do we ensure we serve that need, and as we're serving that need, we are setting ourselves for success as we hope for as professionals in the space. So that is a very critical bit. So those are conversations that we are looking at. What are the trends? What are the emerging dynamics? How do we position ourselves to get there? We need to train. We need to build continuous professional development programs. And I'm glad that I'm part of a team within African Pharmaceutical Network that is trying to bring these trainings to us in a contextualized manner, driven by industry experts who are willing to share their insights and perspective, so that we nurture the next generation of professionals to be ready to serve and to be ready to drive value. But at the same time, on the other end, when you look at some of the other conversations that were happening beyond the industrial bit, clinical practice is still going to be there. How do we tap into the value of the clinical space? How much research are we doing in these spaces? What are the limitations in us being able to do this research? And I think we need to look at it from quantitative, qualitative research in the context of our clinical practice, and what are the additional values that we are delivering. And when I talk about it from that standpoint is, remember there's a video that I did a while back, and I'll also share it in the comment section, about the role of a pharmacist in an NGO setting. And this was with regard to maybe just community outreach program that people are doing and all that. And I remember last month, I had some conversation with some of my colleagues as well. And the conversation was, how do you help us manage our supplies in terms of a community, in terms of community outreach program? It was about, when you have your medicines, there are so many dynamics to it. You have to source for the medicines, you have to supply them, you have to ensure they're being prescribed by the right qualified person, they're being dispensed by the right person. But after that, there is the reverse logistics. How do we ensure that the medicines that are not consumed are taken back from the community? How do we ensure that the medicine that might be handled by the wrong people are actually taken and redistributed so that they don't expire? Because one of the other greatest costs in the healthcare space, especially in the pharmaceutical value chain, is in regard to expiries and wastages. And these wastages are costing us money because somebody already bought that medication. So do we have a redistribution mechanism in terms of supply chain visibility? Do we have a visibility in terms of how to manage reverse logistics? The destruction plans, what is the cost of destruction, and how are we managing that? And these are modalities and discussions that we need to be having. So when you look at it as how do we position pharmacies in a dynamic environment, and that was the conversation that we're having during the conference. One, we need to strengthen our training and capability building. And training, we need to rethink it and reimagine it by knowing that, one, I'm a senior pharmacist, I'm a young pharmacist, we are all in the profession. It is our common profession. If it fails with us. If it succeeds with us. I don't think anybody wants their profession to fail. Two, as much as we're in the profession together and we want it to succeed together, those who came before us have learned the dynamics of how things used to work and how things have been moving for them. We have to embrace that and appreciate them for having gone the journey. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the social structures that have been put in place are left to be without questioning them. We need to also give room for creative thinking, creative improvement, and that is where the dynamism of the young pharmacists are coming in. Bring our ingenuity, creativity, and new perspectives. Challenge the status quo, but challenge with an option, with an alternative, with a solution, so that we are able to now say, this has worked, it has been working, this is how it's been working, these are the merits, these are the challenges. To address these challenges, we are proposing these other alternatives, and therefore we are moving to the beyond order, the chaos that we are looking at. And it's not chaotic in the sense that we are going beyond the norm per se, but rather we are going beyond the norm in a structured way to ensure that this continuous improvement that we are proposing is going to be sustainable. Very critical for us. Then that is a very important bit. Beyond order, but in a sustainable way and in a structured way, so that we are not fighting, but rather supporting each other collaboratively to reimagine the new future that we all wish and aspire for. That is going to be very critical for us. Then once we acknowledge that, we're working with established structures, but also rewiring and reconfiguring these structures. The other bit is to ask ourselves, what do we really need to achieve that envisioned future? What do we need to change in our systems? Training has to be changed. Unless you're trained competently to be able to deliver the service, you will not be able to. So the curriculum has to be reviewed. We need to ask ourselves, where are we reviewing it? How are we reviewing it? And what is my role as a professional? What is your role as a professional? What is our role collectively as professionals? And ultimately, what is our role as a society within PSK? How do we make that reality? And if we are able to do that, then we'll be moving the cog forward. Then beyond training in a curriculum level in terms of undergraduate, postgraduate, and related programs, we need to ask ourselves, what are the continuous professional development programs? How do we contribute to them? How do we ensure that we have access to continuous training that is contextualized and relevant to my day-to-day practice? Because if I don't have training that is relevant to my practice, I would come to a CME to get my CPD points. But after getting the CPD points, what is the translation of that knowledge to real impact in my day-to-day experiences and work? It might not be there. And if it is not there, then it means the CPD is not continuous professional development, because I'm not professionally developing into a new stream and not applying that knowledge. And that is a gap in our practice that we need to ask ourselves and tell ourselves that it needs to change. And then beyond the CPDs, beyond the training, we need to ask ourselves, what are the enabling tools? What are the toolkits that we are applying in our practice? And which are these places where we need to occupy, that we need to get into? And after we know that we have the enabling tools to do the real work that needs to be done, and we know the spaces where we need to do the real work, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we are working in a highly regulated environment. And as highly regulated as the environment is, it means policies need to evolve, policies need to be shaped, and it is our responsibility as the experts, as the practitioners in the environment, to ask ourselves, in which direction should the policy move? How are we going to help it move to that direction? And once we know how we want it to move, where it needs to move, and we are collectively agree that we are going to strengthen our policy and advocacy pillar as professionals and as pharmacists within the PSK, then we're able to move that cog forward. We will move it if we commit to it. And I think when we transition from the learning to the practice, and then from practice to shaping policies, will be a force to reckon with, and we'll be doing it not for the profession but rather for the healthcare system. And if we're able to drive that value, the social construct, the social institutions, where the society, the patient sees you and feels like you are doing something meaningful to me, but as much as it's meaningful to me, it's meaningful to the greater society. We are willing to support you, we are willing to work with you, and we want to make the profession as robust as it can be, because by you being successful in it, you're helping me be successful and be healthy by staying healthy, because I get better services and quality services from you as a professional. So how are we going to do this? By committing, by getting to do the job. And I'm hoping that by sharing these reflections and sharing these insights with you as a professional, you will commit to do your fair share. And as you commit to do your fair share, we'll be here to walk the journey with you. We are willing to engage, we are willing to work together. And personally, at a personal level, I believe these are some of the reasons as to why I'm sharing these insights as well with you. If you feel like there's something that you have a different idea about, a different approach, please feel free, share with me in the comment section. Let's have the conversation and let's move the cog forward, because unless we move it, it will never move. Thank you so much. If you enjoy the conversation, subscribe to the channel, share with your networks, and please share your comments as well. Let's learn, let's engage, and let's have a conversation. Thank you so much, and let's engage next Sunday.